ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow travelers. Good morning. It's a great pleasure to welcome you for this conversation today about the future of artistic practice. It's, as you can see here, a big panel of schoolmakers. This is actually the beginning of a new series, because ever since the beginning of the Basel-Miami conversation, I had moderated a series of 7 panels, which were all about the future of the museum. So we looked at the museum in all parts of the world, and this panel has come to a conclusion. And we start today a new series of panels, which is about the future of artistic practice, and decided to focus today on this extraordinary phenomenon of artist-run schools. What is interesting is when I started in the art world at the late 80s, very beginning of the 90s, there was a phenomenon which we called artist-run space. Artist-run spaces were all over the place, particularly a lot in England and Glasgow, but very much the engine of the European art world. And I thought it's very fascinating that now, in the last couple of years, artist-run spaces have somehow become more and more artist-run schools. Pedro Reyes said yesterday that maybe something is missing, and maybe it has to do with the necessity of a space for critical feedback. I'm sure we're going to find out today more what prompted all our participants to actually invent and do their own school and do this as artists. I must say that this panel was triggered by my late friend Cedric Price, the visionary architect who in the 60s had invented the pottery thinkpad and was also very inspired by Emanuel Wallerstein. Wallerstein wrote in his essay Utopistics about historical choices of the 21st century, exploring kind of new models of production of reality. And he said that this could be a very decentralized, self-organized project. If you look at a lot of movements around the world, local and social movements, the idea of self-organization plays such a big role. Wallerstein also says that new structures of knowledge are an important aspect of new emerging world systems. In the late 18th century, the divorce happened between science and philosophy. Wallerstein says, and he told me that in an interview, what will change everything is to question it, to find a new and maybe also unified epistemology, whereas the two cultures were for 150 or 200 years centrifugal. Complexity studies and maybe new schools are centripetal, that is moving towards each other. And that's exactly what English architect Cedric Price tried to do with his centripetal models of transdisciplinary art centers and schools. Basically, the pottery thinkpad was one of the most visionary, unrealized art schools of the 20th century. It was preceded by the Atom Project from 1969, which was an atomic education facility spread over a whole city. The education was not to be for one age group, but it was seen as a continuous necessity for all members of the community. So this place of learning for all included an industrial education showcase, home study stations, open teach toys, open air servicing, live conditioners, electronic audiovisual equipments. It was really this idea that the school could be like a pop-up school, that the pottery thinkpad could pop up anywhere. It would use an abandoned railway line and also facilities of the British industry, which are no longer in use, and would make those in actually research facilities bell-shaped and would basically reactivate this infrastructure. It was really the plan for a university run by an architect, so that would be an architect-run school. It was the idea of a classroom on the move, where you had all sorts of housing for professors, researchers, and Price has designed incredible inflatables for how this school could actually work. For him, the architect should not be the content, actually, or should not be happy with only being the designer of hardware, but should demand a much broader responsibility for creating activity programs and integrate them. The pottery thinkpad, I think, is a great toolbox and a vision for the 21st century. We will listen now to several visions of artist-run schools of our time, and then hopefully have a discussion about it also with you all. I have now the great pleasure to introduce our first 2 speakers, Eduardo Abaroa and Yoshua Okón. A very warm welcome to them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hans. Well, we're here to talk to you about Soma, an artist-run school. We think of it as a mixture between an artist-run space and a school. And we have been planning this for a while. Yoshua had this idea since the breakup of his alternative space called La Panaderia, which you probably have heard a lot about. One of the most important, if not the most important space in Mexico City run by artists. But anyway, we started this plan, but then until we found a house that was interesting, because the physical place for us was interesting, was important. These are some of the people who are involved in the effort. We gathered sort of a group of artists who show us the way. They give us advice and they send people that might be interested in participating. Sometimes some of the artists even collaborate with us, donating work for the enterprise. This is a building of, that we used. It's an old something. We don't know what it was. We really don't, we tried to figure it out. It supposedly was an old record company, and then it was a warehouse of cleaning goods. What was it? Well, it doesn't, we don't know what it was. But in here, this is how we found it. It was completely filthy and terrible. And this is how it looks right now. So we made an interesting find, and Yoshua here, he took care of all these remodelation devices, and we discussed amongst ourselves what was the the proper settlement for the thing. What we are proposing is basically an artist-run space that has and school that has three elements. One of them is a residency space, and you can see some of these residencies. For some reason, Mexico City doesn't have a very established residence place, even though it has this tradition of bringing artists from all over the world to stay here. And we figured out that we needed one for younger artists. And so basically this is one of the, we have a place where you can actually go and stay there for 15 days, maybe even 3 months. And we have a workshop and stuff where, this is very common in Europe, but it's not common in we have social events, we have all this place, this is our building. Now, I don't know what the stripes are, I apologize for that, they didn't show in my computer, but one of the things that we're trying to do is to encourage dialogue, and we are figuring out the way to bring in all the curators that we can find to speak with our students. And this is one of the, our educational program is basically trying to make people meet more often. Because everybody is usually interested in their own thing and doing their own stuff. And sometimes even with your colleagues, you lose this possibility of talking. And also, I believe that, this is a list of the people that have come over here to Soma. And when we have this sort of like a template that we use, we have people coming here every week. Every single Wednesday there's something going on at Soma. And it could be a curator, it could be an architect, it could be a musician, it could be a writer. We are very open, which is not usual in Mexico City, to most disciplines. One of the things that we're trying to do here is that to bring artists to propose their own courses, which I think is very important, because some of the artists that have come here propose courses that are even artworks in themselves. For example, Maria Garcia Torres, I will mention that, Ruben Gutierrez, other people have proposed this. And what we are trying to do, obviously, is to redefine, in a way, the way the artistic is thought of. I believe that a school should not be a place to teach you how to be an artist after school. You should be doing the important work in school. It's not like you should, actually, in my view, to make a school has to do with redefining what art should be. Of course, we understand that there is a market and then there's some institutional things that we do not want to counter, but we had to find new ways of interacting with it. This, for example, is a course by Mario Garcia Torres in which he reproduced a course by David Askevold in the 1968, I think, in which the Canadian artist asked artists like Dan Graham to give him projects. It was the heyday of conceptual art. So all these artists produced several artworks that were developed by the students. They were produced by the students. So Mario did the same, and we're going to have this show in the near future, probably, I think it's in January, because the school is only a year old, so I don't have that many works. We don't do works at school. What we do is basically talk about the artist's works outside, and what we do is we try to. This is part of a course that I was I was part of this course, but it was organized by Carla Herrera Prats. It was an international course. We brought artists from several countries in the world to take a course at Soma with some of the most important artists. And some of the artists took classes with us, where we traveled around Mexico City with them. We did. Everybody then did some works that had to do with it. Here is, for example, some pictures of some students who we went to some places with one camera, and we tried to make, everybody had to make photographs with that same camera. We made some little investigations of different places in Mexico. This is a work by Elaine Byrne, one of our students. I want to show you this because it's one example of how she comes from Ireland, and she figured out that one of the most controversial presidents of Mexico fled to Ireland. So she made a piece in which she wanted Mexican people to tell their previous president what they thought about him, and she would take the message to Ireland. So it was an amazing collection of commentary, hate mail, pieces of admiration, and she really captured the imagination of the Mexico City press. It went into the news, etc. I'm going to show you some works. In the meantime, I won't explain the works, but I just want to end up my contribution by saying that at Soma we're very early stage, and we see it as an experimental lab. It's not the substitution of an academy. It is not intended, in my view, as just another art school to prepare students. It's a place where we are trying to promote dialogue. We're trying to promote dialogue within Mexico City, within the country, and with other countries in the world. And we invite all the artists present and all the curators, writers to join in this effort. We offer residencies for in exchange with other places in the world. And, I hope this has been a presentation that you might be interested in. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I will try to complement as much as I can Eduardo's presentation. So he already spoke about a lot about the structure of Soma. I'm going to try to focus a little bit in the why behind it and why we decided to do it. As Hans mentioned in his introduction, artist-run spaces were very important and very big in the 90s. And this was definitely the case in Mexico City. Eduardo was involved in one called Temistocles. I was involved in La Panaderia. And most of these spaces, by the end of the 90s, disappeared. La Panaderia closed in 2002. And I think beyond their function as places for exhibitions and places where one could exhibit works that at the time were museums would hardly exhibit. I think these spaces also have a very important social role and community building role that by the end of the 90s wasn't clear. Somehow everybody, with the explosion of the market, everybody thought that the commercial circuit would, like, in many ways replace a lot of these functions. And I think, slowly it started becoming clear that these kind of spaces and structures left a very, very big void. Mostly, the whole art world started veering towards spectacle and very little towards discussion and discourse. It became very clear, at least to me, that these spaces served a very important discursive role in community building, art community building kind of a role. They were really, they were holding the scene together in some ways. So at the same time, I went to and I did my MFA in Los Angeles in 2000. And also Eduardo studied in Southern California. And I was very much influenced by art programs, like MFA programs that were also created by artists. For instance, UCLA was in many, many ways invented and structured by artists, by Chris Burden and another artist. I think Soma, in a way, it's kind of trying to bring together, on the one hand, this tradition of artist-run spaces as places where people gather and where there can be critical discussion of what's happening. And on the other hand, it's also bringing this tradition of MFA programs that are focused a lot in discussion and that are in a way structured in a way that there's like a heavy emphasis on discussion as opposed to making. In other words, the teachers would come and treat you as an artist, not as a student, in a very horizontal way. And in a way, the teachers are not teaching you technical skills, and also and the work that you're making, you're not necessarily making in the school. In the school is where the discussion is happening. So these two things, we try to bring these two traditions together in Soma and create a space in which, on the one hand, it will serve as a gathering point for the different actors, cultural actors in the city and also internationally, and also it will serve this purpose of helping young artists in a way to kind of further develop their careers. Finally, I think also these kind of structures also have a very important intergenerational function, in the sense that it is through them that different generations can interact, and in generations that would not necessarily interact. So we're also very much interested in creating also these kind of intergenerational bridges and dialogues.
Great. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Eduardo. Many thanks, Joshua. Many things we hopefully can then discuss in the conversation. I mean, you mentioned, David, asked about this idea of also to which extent maybe models from the past can be interesting to invent the future, will be an interesting thing for the discussion later. And obviously also the idea of the experimental lab, where maybe everything can happen because nothing has to happen. Something which John Baldessari once told me when he said, in the best case, art schools can kind of trigger an environment where art might happen, like somehow kind of a peer group situation. I've got now the great pleasure to introduce our next speakers, the Bruce High Quality Foundation, who were here in Miami. Many of you will have seen this exhibition last year with their show Happy Endings at the W Hotel. They are now back presenting their new art school project. A very warm welcome to the Bruce High Quality Foundation.
Thank you.
Does it work?
So we wanted to talk about the school and sort of go back in history and hopefully illuminate certain things about how it works and why it came into existence, and talking about a series of projects that the foundation had done over the last 18 months. How many people, I'm sure, saw the Bravo Art World show? Much to everyone's disgust.
The most important thing
not.
to ever happen in the art world.
What's that? So when we heard about that show, and that show was like a repeat of a thing that Jeffrey Deitch had done in 2005, we were sort of, interested and upset with the possibility of this show happening. So a number of people in the foundation rented a car and went to all of the auditions for this reality show. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what it is, it's like this reality show for artists, totally templated off this model for reality shows that they all sort of art done the same way. So there were these auditions in Los Angeles and Miami and Chicago and New York, and we went around to each one, and we're already kind of thinking about the possibility of education. So we set up this sort of portfolio review booth and had, sort of had written some sort of preliminary statements about education, about what we felt like the promise of education was. And basically went around and just talked to a lot of people and did interviews and shot a lot of video that nothing has really happened with up until this point. But, like asked people why they were coming to this thing and what their sort of educational history was and how they feel about their careers as artists at this point. And as you can imagine, or maybe not, a lot of people basically said the same thing. I don't know why I'm here. This is sort of a crapshoot. It's sort of disgusting to me, but I'm doing it. I have no idea what I'm doing. Maybe it'll work out. I live in this city, and there are efforts to get something together here, but I also feel like I'm working in a vacuum to some extent. A lot of people have had absolutely terrible experiences with art school, which is a recurring theme, talking to artists all over the country. Demoralizing or, just terrible experiences where they just got really confused and didn't know what they were doing after that. So people are sort of working in some sort of a vacuum, was the point. And, but you got a sense that a lot of people were sort of trying to put together this sort of beta version of a space, a community, something like that, something up off the ground. So, we did that thing, and it was sort of like all these ideas were sort of percolating, and then in the summer of 2009, the foundation did a lecture called Explaining Pictures to a Dead Bull, which was a sort of research project that traced, on the one hand, the sort of professionalization of arts education to like a post-war GI Bill movement, where all of these art schools that had, for the most part, been sort of vocational craft schools, suddenly, and to some extent, women's schools that sort of created a curriculum of arts, figure drawing, but also crafts and applied sort of vocational skills, suddenly became these sort of more professionalized art schools with the GI Bill, with the sudden, huge rates of like soldiers coming back and so on and so forth. And also the emergence of and then on the other hand, the emergence of a contemporary art market, which we sort of traced to the early 70s, where there were, in particular, this one huge sale of contemporary work that sort of showed everyone that contemporary art could be a massively profitable thing, and tried to draw this connection between these two histories, a history of the market and a history of education, and show that, even though art schools have very much maintained a position that that the art school is a place that sort of exists in critique of a market, that was sort of disingenuous, because people were going into massive amounts of debt, and suddenly, there were all of these people being educated and put in debt, and very few positions of, success or whatever you want to call it in the either exhibition market or the teaching market. So we sort of started feeling like it was like a Ponzi scheme, kind of, or a pyramid scheme, what have you. So we started having a series of dinners with a bunch of artists in New York, and started talking about what it would mean to start a school. And those dinners turned into a sort of weekly meeting that we eventually ended up calling Build Your Own University. And this meeting became the backbone of what is, what became the school, and the school. These dinners sort of started in people's apartments, and eventually, we got a space. And maybe if one of you would like to talk about the design of the school from that point on.
Sure. Is this working? Hello?
Yeah.
So after these dinners started going, we realized that this maybe isn't as complicated as we thought. You get a group of people together, you start a conversation about what an artist education should mean, and by the end of the dinner you realize that you just did the thing that you thought you were supposed to do. The thing you were supposed to create is actually just happening in the room. And so basically we just expanded that out. One of the points that we started thinking a lot about when we were putting the lecture together was this idea that an overly professionalized idea of what arts education is, for better or worse, something that artists aren't creating for themselves. They're not building it from the ground up. They're not deciding what an artist education is from day one. They're just being put through this system that says, get your BFA, get your MFA, and then you'll be at Yale and a curator will stop by and then you'll have a career for 5 years and then you'll be forgotten. We decided maybe that's not the best way to do things. So maybe artists should actually have to confront this weird, dark, endless abyss at the beginning that says, maybe you don't know what being an artist is, but you have some clue that that's what you want to figure out. And maybe you need to be in a room with other people and you all need to beat each other up for a period of time, or maybe the rest of your life. And eventually you'll come out with something. So we started this, this meeting started happening, and people started proposing new ideas for different structures for classes. They said, I want to do a class where people bring in works of art, and we talk about them through the lens of metaphor. This is going to be our way of thinking about what these works are. We're not going to talk about other things. We're going to say, all right, this is a nice painting. Now let's talk about its metaphors. And we said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Everybody want to do that? Yes. So we do that. And all of a sudden, there's 30 people coming once a week to have this conversation, and people are bringing in work, and they're doing this thing. And then someone else comes in, and they say, I want to do a class where we talk about the history of modernism in the arts related to the history of occults in the United States. We said, that's bizarre. Okay, go for it. And so that starts happening, and then we have 15 people coming once a week to perform weird occult experiments and talk about the history of modernism. And then someone else comes and they say, I want to start a detective agency. And what we're going to do is anyone can call us and ask us to solve a problem, so long as it's not a real problem, and we will attempt to solve it. So we say, okay, what do you need? And maybe a phone number. So we set up a phone line, and then they have a detective agency. And they have really cute business cards. This became a sort of cycle. And so every week we were having the big meeting, the Build Your Own University meeting, and started with people we knew, and it expanded. Next thing we knew, we were having 60, 70 people show up to these meetings, people proposing classes. We said, this is getting kind of nuts. But we ended up with, in the space of a few months, we went from a group of 10 people having dinner to a group of 70 people in these meetings, 120 people coming through every week, about 8 or 9 classes happening, and we were all doing it with next to no money. We got some support from the organization Creative Time, which was really excited about getting involved, and we've had this really interesting dynamic with them because we know just about as much as they do about what's going on. No idea. But it's been a really fascinating process where as people keep coming in, we keep having to solve different sorts of problems, and you realize everyone who's proposing a class has, they come in with very different ideas of what that's going to mean. They assume there's a student body for one, which is a crazy idea. No one's paying for anything, so that means that no one's necessarily going to show up. So some people, they'll show up with an idea for a class, and they have a curriculum. It's like, I have 15 weeks, and it's laid out like this, and there's going to be readings, and then there'll be papers assigned every 3rd week. And you just look at them and say, really? Yeah, really. And so they figure it out eventually that that's not quite what's going to happen. You're going to have to bring your own people in. We're providing you nothing except a room, and here's a key. And if you want this thing to be interesting, you're going to have to make it interesting for the people who are actually involved. And they're going to have to make it interesting for themselves. So it's a very different relationship to what education is than what you get when you just go and get your bachelor's degree or your master's degree. And right now, most of the things that we have going on are happening in the evenings because people have to, you know, make money some other time. But we're in the process of looking for a more permanent home, trying to find a space where we can keep this thing going and maybe eventually do more things during the day. Am I leaving out any important facts?
It's at a sort of impasse now where, you know, after a year and like so many different examples of, you know, so many different models for how things could be done, there are still, you know, it still feels very much like it's in the mode of experimentation, and because the sort of like form content problems are, you know, one of the things that was always sort of like clear in a way was that we wanted the form content problems that come with making art to be applied to education in real time. So, you know, like this idea that there isn't a model for a class and that you know, there isn't necessarily even a model for the school, and that is something that should be getting figured out, not beforehand but during, is something that's still very in flux right now. And, you know, the school is sort of in between locations, and so now feels like a moment when all of these things have been sort of explored and problematized, and by no means answered, and sort of it feels like it's at a good impasse because there's structural changes happening at the moment.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the point of the Build Your Own University meeting, is that all the administration of the school is internal to what the school is. Like, that is the educational experience as much as a class with a more specific topic might be. So the idea that there is no preconceived idea coming in. If you want to participate in creating what the university is, that's part of your experience. So if you think that maybe we should have no classes, then that can come up. That's a very real thing. So basically all of our curriculum administration and bureaucratic, whatever that stuff is that schools do all the time, we do that, but we do it as a class. This is part of what we're doing, and that's, it keeps it very interesting because we never know if, like, we might just shut down tomorrow. If we have the wrong group of people in the room, then all of a sudden everyone says, oh, this is a bad idea, and we walk away. But that hasn't happened yet, so keep your fingers crossed.
Great, thank you very much. Many thanks for this presentation. There's lots of things we can then discuss. It made me think also of something Thomas Bayerle once told me, who was so instrumental to make the Städelschule in Frankfurt, one of the great art schools in Europe, when he always said the art school really is the Mensa. It's the restaurant where it all happens. So it's fascinating that it all grew out of dinners. And one of the things also you told me in New York, which we hopefully later can address in the conversation, is your desire to make that really a nationwide conversation or a nationwide campaign and carry it into all kinds of other cities. I've now got the great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Tania Bruguera. Tania invented the Cátedra school in 2002. It's a school which had a lot to do with time-based art, performance art, and introduced that and produced reality. One of the things which I thought is very interesting when we spoke this morning is that you said it's not only important the beginning, but it's also important how to end a project. And that has to do again with Cedric Price, whom I presented at the beginning with his pottery think, but because he always said architect-run or artist-run initiatives, like any other initiative, should have a limited lifespan. A very warm welcome to Tania Bruguera.
Thank you. Well, Cátedra Arte de Conducta, sorry, in English, sorry. Arte de Conducta was a project that came out of two main elements. The first one was my frustration after my experience at Documenta 11, in which I had high success in one area that really bores me, and I was very depressed in another area in which I was supposed to do a political art piece, but people had to see it in 2 seconds. They had no really time to see the work or to change their ideas about reality because there was so much to see and so quickly. So I realized that it was stupid to do an artwork about political issues in such an environment. And I decided after that to divide my work in long-term and short-term pieces. So the short-term pieces are the pieces for the art world, timing, and the long-term pieces are the pieces for the society, timing. So Arte de Conducta is the second piece I done long-term. The second, the idea is, of course, that in order to make people change their reality appreciation, you have to work, I think, in a minimum of 5 years. This is the way in which Cuba and socialist country planify their economy. So I found it funny to take that into the artistic limitations. The second aspect that really frustrated me was the fact that Cuba had a very extraordinary avant-garde generation in the 80s who left the country and was substituted with a very complacent and very formalistic response to the reality, in which artists were very savvy about creating a career and not so interested about doing artwork. And I realized that I needed to do something about it. So I came back in 2002 to Havana and decided that if I wanted to do a political art piece, I had to appropriate the elements of politicians. And one of the biggest tools of politics is education. So I decided that I had to create my own space for education in order to counter-fight the other very impositive one way of seeing things. And basically, for me, Cátedra, Arte, Conducta is an art piece. So the first thing I had to negotiate with the people in the project was when they asked me, are we materials for your art piece? So I had to say, yes, somehow, but don't worry about it. So let's enjoy it. So basically, it's an art piece. It's a political art piece in the form of education. So the way in which I was structuring this was I had to collaborate with the organization, the real art school in Cuba, because it's a law forbidding people meeting together in houses for ideas. So I had to somehow infiltrate the system in order to put the bomb inside the system. So basically, I collaborated with them, and it was great because they didn't provide me a space, so I did it in my house, which gave me a lot of freedom because I could say everything I wanted and invite everything I wanted without being looked at so much. They didn't have money to pay, and that was awesome because then I had absolute freedom and no way they can control me. And every professor I invited, I pay for it, so that was great. Then, basically, the way in which people were selected was, we did a kind of theatrical moment in which we had like a test, you know. So people came to the house, made performances, and talk about the previous work, and we were a jury, always having an international person in it who chose the people. But it was really a theater because anybody who wanted to come could be in it. So it was actually a piece about opening a social art space for ideas. And it had to have some sort of resemblance to something people know in order for them to understand what it was. So this is why I kind of reproduce some of these elements. So another aspect is the money. I decided that I wanted to teach for real during the time this project was going to happen. So the money circulation was from teaching to teaching. You know, so it was coming from that, and I'm not selling very much, as my galleries know. So I had to do this kind of recirculation of the money to the same goal. I think I have, can I have this? I divided this in 3 elements. I don't call it students or professor, I call it participants and guests visitors and participants. So we had, let me see if this works. So we had, it was in the house, it was very informal. Of course, I lost my house because in the sense that it was all the time full of people, eating, taking showers, everything in the house. So we spent a long times of discussions. And I divided in three parts. The participants were selected, always having a minimum of 1 or 2 people a year who never did artwork before in their life, but they liked it, so they entered. So we had students that people who were students of previously of sociology, theater, architecture, psychology, and so on. So people who never did art before. We always had one art historian who had to do performances, because I said, in order for you to talk about performance, you have to do it, so you really know how easy or not easy things are, so they get impressed so easily. And that was the way in which the piece has been recorded. Through each time we had a guest, there was a person doing a kind of narration or notes about what happened, you know, some sort of record. In terms of the artists, we invited scientists, sociologues, psychologists, folklorists, people, studies people, philosophers, and so on, and also artists. In terms of the artists, I invited people who were dealing with performances or political art. And in terms of the other areas, it was people who were working with creativity as their main subject. So basically, the way in which people were selected was in relation with what I thought was needed in terms of like thinking about political art and so on, and also the needs of the work of the people. So all the people involved in the project, all the participants, they were producing work on their own, and I was looking what they were going to, and I said, okay, it would be nice if they talked to Tiravanija, for example. And then I talked to Tiravanija, I said, just come in, and they had the experience. So I think it was kind of a double shift, you know. Basically, the people who came, this is a work by Silde Safa. The people who came, they spent a week. Their only complaint is they never went to the beach. So they worked too hard, and because I always trick them, I always say, no, you come from 3 hours a day, and then it will be fine. And then, of course, they were spending the whole time in the house or with the participants of the project. And some of them did artworks as well. So this is a Safa piece for a show. We did, some of them were doing artwork, some of them produced the work, and the experience of the people in the Cátedra was to help them producing the work. And it was very interesting because, for example, there were people helping Stan Douglas doing the piece for the Venice Biennial based on Memorias de su Desarrollo. And then they came and were working with Alori Calzadilla, and they couldn't understand. It was like, whoa, they are so different way of working. So it was almost like how practice is the way of learning about doing work as well. This is the work of Jaima Carasana. And we did a lot of works in the outsides. You know, we were, for example, showing their work because I think it was important not only to have a sort of like mental landscape of what could be political art, but actually understanding how to create strategies to actually be able to do it in certain conditions. And we did also exhibitions, but they only lasted like 2-3 hours. So we did every 3 months or so. We were preparing for only 2 or 3 hours of exhibition. I wanted to do this because I didn't want them to focus on object, but more in the idea of events, you know, keep this. So this is Jaima Carrasana. And of course, you might not, you know, it's very subtle, but todo en orden means everything in order. And basically it lasts like 2 seconds because some people came spontaneously from the street and took off the work from the walls and everywhere because they found it offensive. This is the work of Nuria Well. She's a Spanish artist, and basically this was a project for Cubans. I only accepted very, very few foreigners in the project. They were very insistent, or they came illegally to the project and they joined the project illegally. So it is important to me that the project was for Cubans, even if other people could enjoy it. But also it was very important that I didn't talk about the project during the time it was happening. So it was happening from 2002 until 2009. And during that time, I didn't talk about it. So it was kind of, and it was important because I didn't want the people in the project to feel the pressure of having to build up a career as artists, or the pressure of wanting to define what the practice was while it was happening. So now you've seen the documentation of it. This is Hamlet Labastida, who is there. Hamlet? He's a great artist, and he worked mainly with video. He also do a very, very political work, and he do videos and collage and so on. And for example, this is a piece in which his piece in the show was showing the people a very subversive video he edited in the camera. So it was this kind of like, not everybody could see the work and so on. It was important to close it. I'm going to show Jaima's, well, this is the show. It was very important to close the project because I think a problem with artists doing institutions, whatever they are, if they're artists run or schools or hospitals or whatever they want to do, the problem is when they start to believing about what they did. And I think it's important to close projects so we don't kind of institutionalize ourselves. So, and this is a big risk because then you start living the fantasy of the institution too much. So basically, I closed the project by doing a 9-day exhibition in which every day the show changed very dramatically. And it was during the Havana Biennial. It was important also that the project had an aspect of promotion of the people who were part of it. Actually, Ariel Orozco, who was in your list, he was on the first year of the program. For example, I have 2 people who have passed the Rice Academy. There are people who experienced for the first time going out of Cuba through the project, going to residencies and having shows outside. And I think it was very important to normalize some situations that in Cuba are very abnormal. So that's also part of the project. So these are some of the pieces. This is Elmer and Draxet piece upstairs, a special piece they did for us. And so on. So I want to show you just, this is Yali Romagosa, who is there too, on the back. And she did, the last day she did a fashion show with her collection. So basically, I had to close it because the project was too successful. And that was wrong for the project, so that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tania. Again, many points we will be able to discuss also in the conversation. I suppose also the whole idea how such projects, not that they have a master plan, but very organic somehow grow. I now have the great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Domingo Castillo, who is member of the collective The End and Spring Break here in Miami. He decided to make the presentation here by bringing 2 birds, 2 paroquets. It's the first time ever we have in our Basel conversation paroquets. So a very warm welcome to Domingo Castillo, to Seth, and to Prince.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to mention that I do the project with Kiwi Farah and Patty Hernandez. So essentially the End Spring Break, because Miami, outside of our Basel, isn't a vibrant art scene. There isn't a lot of conversation, there isn't a lot of dialogue, but what we wanted to present was a chance for people to be able to speak and be able to present whatever they want. The project works in a couple different ways. Like when we first started it, it was in May, and usually everyone starts something new or opens up their businesses in December when everyone's here so everyone can find out about it. But we decided to open up in May, and finding a name for it, we thought of The End because it was the end of tourism, the end of everything, the melodramatic, nothing happens in Miami. So for 6 months it's the end, and right now we're in spring break because everyone's coming to Miami. and it's spring break, better weather than most places. So the project first started with the idea of lectures and how artists give lectures, or just people give lectures in general. And usually when people are lecturing, they talk about their practice, their work, the things that they do. And we want to invite people to lecture about their research. So not really about your work, but what informs your work, or what really is not art related at all. So it's open to invite, it leaves it open to invite anyone to really talk about the city of Miami, what people do in general, and how people have reacted to this city. And for example, one project, a professor of mine, Pip Brandt, she learned German and then went to Germany to study theater, but she teaches art and never talks about it. So we invited her to talk about German theater, and she did a performance and explained German theater, which is great, because while I was in art school, she just casually mentioned it, and that was much more interesting to me than the work she was doing, or the dialogue between work. Another aspect of the space is that we have weekly film screenings that are chosen kind of by anyone that wants to show something, and there seems to be a thread in how, from a conversation or from the presentation of someone gives, if they mention a film, it'll get shown. Or if they mention something that's kind of related through a film, it'll get shown. So really, the programming creates itself just through dialogue. Since we don't have any funding or any money, we just kind of borrow space, ask people to borrow their apartments, their studios. If a gallery has a space they're not using, we'll take that space and kind of make it ours, claim everything. Like right now, this panel is part of Spring Break because it's something that's happening here and we're a part of it, so we kind of just claim it and put a flag. Let's see. Really, the project was meant for people in this city. We want to invite people to come here and kind of work with institutions to really develop what we can do and what's available for people here, for people outside, for people to come here outside of Art Basel. And we're kind of trying to submit proposals to institutions to kind of partner with institutions to do their programming and keep it nomadic. Oh, I didn't mention the space. Yeah, the space is nomadic, and I don't know. I think that's it.
Thank you, Domingo.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Sorry.
much. I got the great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Piero Golia. Piero, our conversation about art school started some years ago. We did this panel together in Munich, and it was actually a great encouragement because we did a panel with several artists and architects for the DLD conference presenting this idea of new schools, and the question was, do we need a new Black Mountain College for the 21st century, a transdisciplinary school, and you presented your Black Mountain School there. And something quite extraordinary happened. There was actually a member in the audience who at that time had no involvement with the school, and listening to the panel decided that he needed to urgently do a school in Moscow. So it really produced reality out of this panel. Piero will talk today about the ongoing adventure of this school, so a very warm welcome to Piero Golia.
Thank you very much, Hans Ulrich, and thanks to the Basel people who've been super, super kind to invite us. I'm coming from a very bad week, and it's very nice to be welcome. Thanks. I will try to avoid talking about intention and why we start the school or why we need the school, because I think everybody more or less has been explaining, and I think we all share the same need and everything. So I will try also to make it fast because I know I'm the last, so I want to be short and everything. So I will focus on just 2 or 3 little things that I co-founded, somewhere was written Piero Golia founded, but I didn't really found it. I co-founded the mountain school with my best friend Eric Wesley 6 years ago in 2005. And thanks God, from then we did grow up a lot. So now we have a lot of people to share the amount of work to run our institution, because we are really proud to be considered an institution, because I think when we start the school, a lot of things, I think my big problem was always when people, they ask you what's so special about the mountain school, because I never really understood it myself, because I never went to an art school. I think the first time I walked to an art school was last year when I was teaching at UCLA, and I finally understood what a normal art school, so that's why people, they thought we were different. The mountain school, it's has a program who starts in January and lasts for 3 months out of the year. Every year, oh, that sounds Ulrich. That every year we select 15 students. Part of them is from United States. Part of them comes from the rest of the world. Yeah. This is few random images, everything I find on my laptop. We are really not so bad in documentation, but documentation is not so important because we are all about time. You know, in life, monumentality is done by time, and a school, it's made by students and faculty. You know, for this is very important to us. If you look a lot of MFA program in America, and they are all based on this idea. Somebody before was talking about the idea of building your own self in terms, but I think there is a big difference in life between and in semantic between networking and community. And I think what we were really interested in building was a community more than networking. And that's why our program is pretty traditional. You know, once I said to somebody, I really like the English sentence that says, "We ain't no punks." Like, we really have the student, if you don't show up on time, you get kicked out. There is 3 classes, 3 days out of the week, 2 days classes. It's pretty comparable to university or community college program. We have science, law, philosophy, art, plus we have an extra sets of talks like the one you see, I think, in the back, and we have artists in the selection. We try to keep the artist images so some of you can recognize some faces in the picture, but our program is open to everybody. We had architects, musicians. We also had a biologist. That was a big pride. What else? Wow. It's pretty nice to see, because it's like 6 years, they look very, very long, no? And then you see them in picture and they last for 30 seconds, I think, and everything. This is Dan Graham. Dan has been coming to the mountain school, I think, more or less every year once. Big part of our program is made trying to create this perfect harmony in between movement and study. So sometimes our students, that's why the class is done half and half, and that's why we try always to create a dialogue where the students they never have a steady point in the conversation. So one day you become visitor when you go to visit somebody who's been a presence in town for so much time, or sometimes you have to switch and you become steady for the traveler, no? And this is Martin Law, for example, is the guy who invented the intergalactic freeways. This is I don't remember. This is another diagram. There is a big collection of diagrams here. Paul McCarthy, and I chose this picture for a reason, because I was always interested in showing. This is Thomas Demand, who was in Munich at the talk Hans-Ulrich was speaking about. Our main point in the mountain school, it's what I was talking about, is the idea of creating a community, no? And when Hans-Ulrich was talking before about reality, for me was very important, because I really think that the school we started was all about reality, no? It's like at the end, personal intention, they become very unimportant when you decide to open a school. No, at the end, the school is just students and faculty, and we don't do much more than trying to get the real best people we can. The school is completely free. Nobody's paid for teaching. We can fly people in, so we live off miracles, and thanks God there have been a lot of miracles in 6 years. And I think last year we closed with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I don't know, I hope we will make it to the 10th year alive. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, publishing a book whose an alphabetical archive of everything happened during those 5 years, and I hope we will publish a 10-year one, and maybe, you know, one day we will become one of those boring institutions, and you know, 10 kids will give a talk on how boring and how much a failure we are, and the world is changing, no? And I think we are pretty okay, no?
Thank you, Piero. Now there is many things to discuss. One first thing I was wondering, I mean, when we think about the future, very often it's built out of fragments from the past, and in relation to the mountain school, we discussed in Munich the Black Mountain College. I was wondering, for all of you doing these schools, if there are models from the past, artist-run schools or artist schools or schools in general. I mean, on the way here, I read Luciano Fabro's great book on Hutemas and the whole Russian school model of the early 20th century. Are there any schools from the past which inspire you for your schools?
A.S. Neil's Summerhill School in Scotland was something that we looked at a lot. He did a thing there. Summerhill is famously the first free school, in big quotation marks. People actually did pay to go as a boarding program, but it was free in the sense that there was no requirements. So students from the ages of 4 and 5 up to 18, they chose when to go to class. If they didn't want to learn to read, then they didn't learn to read. And the way that the school worked, the way that they punished people for stealing from each other, the way that and the way that they decided what sort of school activities would happen were all done through this thing called the general meeting, and everyone had one vote. So if you were on the faculty, you had one vote. If you were in kindergarten, you had one vote. And A.S. Neil's a really fascinating character because he was a guy that liked to build things, he liked to drink and smoke cigars, and he has a few lovely books that he wrote, and he sort of tells the story when he's an older man about what a sort of bizarre and fascinating experience it was to watch people create their own education. So that was a school that was very inspiring in terms of thinking about self-created education.
Any other examples for schools?
I think we should never forget Nova Scotia in Canada, and Pierre, Dominique Gonzalez Foster, and Philippe Parrino, I think was called Temporary School, and then all the schools. No, I think if we still can use the word school, it's I think in a way all the schools that everybody complains about, in a way they build the term school, so we wouldn't be here if they wouldn't be the old ones, no?
I mean, in my talk, I did mention UCLA in the 90s, where like Paul McCarthy, Chris Burden, John Baldessari were involved. And it was like an incredible moment because I think they could really had the opportunity to structure the art school within this huge system that is UCLA. They basically got the possibility to completely determine the structure of the program itself. And now UCLA changed a lot. They are not teaching there anymore, but UCLA in the 90s to me was like a big influence.
Great. Any other examples?
I think the United Nations Plaza project that happened was a big influence, just because you don't really have to be there to read everything that was presented, and it still functions because everything is available to you. You can just really start it up with some friends, start reading everything, and then start conversation.
In my case, I read a text quite by chance by Rancière and Jacotot, the ignorant schoolmaster, and it was a very good influence for me because it put into perspective another instance of emancipation project. And as you know, his method is quite strange, but it does imply a teacher. It's not that you don't need teachers. You need a teacher, but the teacher does not know more than you do. Mm-hmm. So it is interesting to realize that. And one thing that I would like to comment apart from that is that, in a way, Soma is a little bit different from these spaces that we're mentioning. It has had the influence of Black Mountain. It has had the influence of United Nations Plaza. It has had the influence of Tania's school, and it has some input also from the Bruce High Quality Foundation because it's new. Somehow we started backwards, right? And also, in my view, Soma is a way to interact with institutions. We do have a regular program. We do have, inscriptions. Some students pay. Actually, most students pay, even if it's small. And Aimé Servitje here is one of our fantastic supporters. And, we do have some sort of institutional thing. And what I think is that we try to interact with institutions, and we are an institution.
Both.
I think that the problem here is not to completely dismiss institutions. At least in Mexico, we have been part of building the institutions. Artists have been part in building museums, in building connections, collections, and I believe that Soma has to interact with these institutions like Art Basel Miami. We cannot just dismiss everything, It's, we have to invent models for artists to survive within all these structures and to plan new things.
But what you say about institution leads us, or do you have any other models you'd like to mention before we move on? Models from the past?
Joseph Beuys. I mean, I think we all know.
Yeah. The question about institutions, I mean, I guess I wanted to talk about that, but if you were going to ask a question, then go for it.
Yeah, no, for institutions, it ties really in with what you said about institutions, because obviously institutions do usually not have a limited lifespan. And I was curious about that sort of whole idea. I mean, Tania, having a limited lifespan and bringing the school to an end. All the other schools are still running. And there was a very interesting quote yesterday in the art newspaper, in the article of Marisa Masria-Katz on the question of art schools, when she quoted Sam Durant, who teaches at CalArts. And he basically applauds, of course, all these initiatives you're doing, these self-organized schools, but he at the same time injects a doubt about their fleeting existence and sort of nomadic, short-lived initiatives, as he says, are akin to today's job market, where no one wants to give health insurance and there is no stability. So I was just wondering if you could have any reactions from the panel to that. Limited lifespan, sustainability.
I mean, I think that, it's funny because there's such at least, I don't know, a lot of the institutions that I feel like you see in New York have this sort of similar, there's this sort of universal wariness of like institutional lifespans, because there's such a sense of like this thing started in this really grassroots way. A bunch of people got together and made it, and then they grew it up, and then at some point the infrastructure of the institution became like it's like in Terminator when the machines like become self-aware, and then the thing in and of itself is like this huge beast, you know? And like so many people have seen like institutions like go past the lifespan of the people who started them, and I think that that's really interesting possibility, an exciting possibility. I don't disparage that right away, but that's something that people seem to feel very discouraged about, and as well they should, because when it's like all artists create infrastructure for themselves to survive, and when you start serving that infrastructure, it becomes problematic.
Well, I think there is a difference, because my Arte de Conducta was an art piece for me. It's not an institution. It was in the form of an institution. Everybody had to believe it was an institution. It worked as an institution, but it needed to have a political effectiveness. And political effectiveness is an ephemeral situation. It's not permanent. So therefore, you know, there was, I mean, I didn't want to end it, of course, because I was really having a great time, and I felt like, I mean, it's wrong to say it myself, but I know I was kind of fulfilling an emptiness that existed in Cuba regarding education and contemporary art, and another option for international artists, you know, talking about nowhere. And it could be another option about international artists talking about specific political and social situations. But at the same time, I was working from the inside, so I had to be very aware that the real institution would not contaminate my project. And for example, it took a year and a half to close it because nobody wanted to close it. People participated, they wanted to close it. People I invited keep calling me, oh, I want to be part of your project, you know. And it was interesting, but for me, the only way to see the work was to be a participant. You could not know about it. You had to be and give something in order to see it, and it was very important for me. But I knew that politically it was better to create a void and stop fulfilling the void, you know? So I had to take a very difficult decision for myself, you know? And I think that's the way, because once you close that door, things implode, you know? Because people had to start like, go from a very like, kind of a reclined position into, okay, now I have to do something because I'm missing something. So I created a need, in a way, from the people. And of course, we're talking about very specific group, very close, very small, which is the art community in Cuba, which is not New York or Mexico. So I think it was important to do that. But it is also important to be responsible. Like, for example, it's not that I closed and I left. I mean, I still send them information about residency. I recommend them for a lot of stuff, you know. I still put them in shows. They just were in the Liverpool Biennial. I mean, I try to not abandon it, but just a change of the status of the project.
No, it was just interesting to me when Tania finished her presentation, basically saying it was too successful, and that's why I had to close it. I mean, I like in my own experience, like you know, the space I ran in the 90s, well, from 94 to 2002. You know, when I closed, it was a very similar situation. We also did like one show every day for the last week, and it was in the moment when the space was probably like the most successful. So many people came in, and a lot of people complained to me and asked me, you know, why do you close? And I couldn't. For I think 7 years, I could not come to I didn't have an answer to that question. Like I really didn't. And I finally, I think, realized that the reason why it closed is because it needed to, you know, reinvent itself. And at the time, we had no clue on how to do that. So in that sense, even though it was successful, it started becoming obsolete. And I think, you know, these kind of structures are very organic, and they constantly need to be reinventing themselves. So I mean, I have no problem with an institution, and I do consider Soma an institution. I did consider the project I did an institution, but I think the problem is when an institution loses the capability of reinventing itself. So that's basic.
I would like to say a little bit of a different approach to yours, but I hope a little bit related. It is that in the context of Soma, which is the whole of the country, because we have students from the whole of Mexico. It's not just, actually it's a majority of people coming to Mexico City, sometimes pretty far away. But it comes as some sort of, and a little bit what happened with La Panaderia and other artist-run space, artists have come to substitute or to fill the gaps of a dying state, of a dying welfare state. I know that this sounds a little bit bombastic, but it's true. We've been trying to, if the state art education doesn't work, we have to fix it. If we don't have good spaces for art, we have to make them. And this is important because it is a marker of a situation, in my country at least, and I think in other of your countries also. Education is in decline. The quality of education, of public education, and even of private education is going really, really downhill. In Mexico, it is a political problem of the greatest importance. You see drug dealing and crime as a big problem. The real problem in Mexico is education. And I believe that in our possibilities, we are trying to contribute to a different change in this situation. No? That's why, in a way, we have to fill into these gaps and see what we can propose that is new. But it's not the circumstance of New York. It's not the circumstance of people trying to be artists and trying to figure out what art is just like that. It's of people trying to fit in a society. Young people in our society really do not have a place. Not only as artists, but as people. So we're trying to figure out.
But I suppose it's a global problem. It's a similar thing right now in Europe with all the budget cuts of universities and schools. And that leads actually to the question of the butterfly effect, maybe, no? What the French call l'effet papillon. There was a very nice text, actually. It was a little book which came out in the 90s about the Grenoble miracle and the Grenoble art school. And Dominique Gonzalez Förster talked about this idea that a little art school can have a butterfly effect and somehow change the world. And this ties in with the conversation we had with Bruce High Quality Foundation in New York a couple of weeks ago, when you proclaimed that you really wanted this to become a nationwide campaign. You wanted it to really change education in the United States. And I wanted to ask you all if you could talk a little bit about this. Are your schools a butterfly effect? Piero?
I'm the one who lost more hair, so I feel I should be the one answering to this question, no? I think nobody of us never talk about responsibility, no? Because it's very funny. You always consider the difference between Ulrich and I, that he's a positive person, I'm a negative person, no? So he's thinking about. I think it's very important, because when she was talking before, sometimes I'm a little slow, so I get outdated, so I felt it was too late to say, but now maybe I should. She said something very nice. She said it's my project, and this justify a lot of things, justify the end, justify a lot of things. And in my case, for example, I consider it something completely detached. I never considered the school as something I do on my own, or I always consider it something like a duty, or and I'm the secretary of the mountain school. But about the butterfly effect, I think this is a very important thing, and we should pay a lot of attention about, because you were talking about reality, no? And I think one of the biggest failure I heard and I felt in a way was when I was talking with Anton about they wanted to do a manifesto, was like a school, no? We have really to pay a lot of attention in not becoming, you know, like a trend model, you know, like the difference in between, I don't know, like why an Aston Martin, it's a very, very nice car, and why a Toyota who looks like an Aston Martin is not like a nice car, no? And I got very, very hard one day with Anton because I was looking at those applications that they received for Manifesta, and I was telling, you know, man, these guys are not coming to school. Those guys are participating to Manifesta, they think. And so I think we have a big responsibility when we talk about a multiplication effect in making a strong statement that you know, if you do a school, you do a school for building and exchanging knowledge and experience. Otherwise, we will risk to become one more of this MFA program trained to make this little monster tough to get a gallery and pay back their school loan. No? So we have to pay a lot of attention maybe when we do those talks to make sure that, you know, we don't get misinterpreted and we will not build another class of little sharks. No?
More comments on the butterfly effect?
Well, I hope, honestly, with the project we're doing, I hope that it does become a butterfly effect, because then it's just much more free access to all these random bits of information that's out there. Because everyone's doing research now. Everyone is like working on something, you're studying something, you're learning about something, and then you know this bit of information that is actually much more useful than the end product of what you use it for. And if that could spread to other places, other institutions, it might make just programming in general for institutions much, I don't know, better for the public, better for just education in general, how people get that education if it's free, since these programs just want to bring people in, like just offer something that brings people, just catches their attention almost.
Well, I think for me the butterfly effect has nothing to do with success. It had to do with, in that specific case, with the fact that we were very clear that it's something called the work, la obra, and something called the career. And I think for me, the butterfly effect will be if the people who worked through the project were doing great artwork and not careers. And I think this is for me. And hopefully the butterfly effect is like when today I meet some other people and they talk to me about people who pass around Cátedra, Arte, Conducta, like they like their work or they're around. So we'll see, but that's not in my hands.
Any other comments? Maybe
in case there is any Russian millionaire, we are all up to get.
No, I finished my project. I don't need the money anymore.
I do.
Can the Bruce High Quality Foundation tell us more about this nationwide campaign? I was really curious to.
No. Part of what's been fascinating about just thinking through the problem of art education, and what we did a lot when we were first beginning the school, was realizing there's a conversation in the United States about the purpose of education that's very different from what it was when we actually started the United States. You know, the idea, however flawed it was that if we were going to let everybody vote, then we ought to have some citizens that aren't complete morons. So we're going to make public education a possibility. So everyone is going to be well-rounded, and they're going to be able to think through problems, and then they can go and vote, and we won't end up with Sarah Palin as the President of the United States.
Are you teaching the Tea Party people?
Oh yeah, we're totally in with the Tea Party. Well, somewhere this became a different thing. Education became a thing where you get educated so that you can get a job. And so science and math become the dominant thing in the United States. All of our jobs are leaving, and oh no, the United States can't make any more nuclear weapons if we don't have scientists. So that's the big push, and that's where funding goes to. And the conversation about the purpose of liberal arts education, much less of fine arts education, is, well, what the hell is that for? Why do you need to know how to read? That's not important. Or why do you need to know how to be a citizen of your country or a citizen of the world? And arts education is sort of the fascinating extreme of that, because there is no point in arts education at all. It's like the most ridiculous thing you could possibly do. It's like, let's all get together and talk about this completely useless thing that we're going to dedicate our lives to. And it's a really sort of strange point that even while that's going on and everyone realizes how ridiculous it is, people are paying $30,000 a year and they're thinking, oh, now I need to get a job with this completely ridiculous thing. And so schools are moving towards a hyper-professionalized system where an education is supposed to mean something, but they're going into $200,000 of debt and there's no job. There actually is no job. And 3,000 people are at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago right now. There are not 3,000 jobs in the
There
arts.
are no jobs in art for artists.
I know.
So I don't know what
There's no jobs
they
at all.
expect.
I know, but then they're going, how much debt do they have for no job?
But because they are stupid. I'm a businessman.
Exactly.
I don't invest money. Actually, I'm a very bad businessman because I do it a lot, but I'm conscious about it that I waste my money. But
Yeah.
I'm a businessman. I wouldn't pay 60 grand to go to USC because I know I will not make them back. So that's their fault. Like their parents, they
Right.
should tell them, you know,
bad
don't
for
put
business.
money
Yeah.
in something.
I
is
think,
not
it's also, I think it's also a fault of the United States because they have this attitude here towards an artist that is a job. You know, in Europe I found, now that I'm in Europe, that the artists are artists doing a job, but there's not a job, you know? So here they have this thing that, I know because some people, I teach a lot here in the United States, so I know my students sometimes enter just because they want the resources, which is a valid thing, which is also very expensive. With that money they can buy their own stuff. But mostly it's because they want to teach afterwards, because they think the only job for an artist is teaching.
I know, but you're going to get a
Right.
teaching job and you're going to be paid.
You need the paper for that.
Oh, yeah.
No, but
It's also
something-
not worth it.
I'm a man of
I know.
science, it's statistic. In every class there is 30 students and 1 teacher. No, so when you come out from school, when the guy dies, you have 1 chance on 30 to get the job. So it becomes very, 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 very tough. But now, one thing I don't want to be misunderstood. Like I even tried to apply to one of the MFA programs in LA, but one of my friends who runs it sent my application back and told me to fuck off. But I wouldn't even apply to to the mountain school because I would think, why should I apply to something? You know, I don't know.
But
life is a bitch.
But
but I think it's also important to bring, I think, the market into this conversation. Because I think, I mean, at least I think that a lot of the people that apply to these programs and get in debt has the illusion that the market will somehow, you know, solve it all, you know. And I think, I mean, to a big degree, it's like this illusion that the market solves it all and you know, regulates it all by itself magically. I think it's a big part of the problem.
yeah, I remember
definitely.
in Escohigan, I taught at Escohigan, I remember it's like a summer program, and I remember all the students were asking, how can I get the gallery? That's all they care about.
Yes.
They don't want to know what you think about their work. They want to know how to get better artists. They want to know how to get a gallery in New York specifically.
Yeah,
But that's
and I
something
think
which started in the 80s, I suppose. I mean, when we did the thing in '97 with Sahat Maharaj, who is a great teacher, and with the artist Gillian Waring, and somehow it was called the Future Contemporaries, selecting, you know, art students for an exhibition, and we used that as a trigger to launch a whole debate of, you know, future of art school, and ask about 100 people, if you would shut now all the art schools, how would you reinvent them? No, it was a questionnaire we sent around, and Sarat said then, I will never forget that, he said it's a problem which started in the 80s, because in the 80s there was all of a sudden this idea of instant exposure, that art students wanted and needed, and art schools promoted instant exposure. And he said, what we need is to reintroduce a delay, so the necessity of a delay. So I was wondering if that's something which plays a role in your schools.
In my opinion, one of the, you know, you can see good reasons behind bad things, and you can see bad things for as reasons for good things. And I believe that a little bit of the emphasis in art education also comes after a market crash. An artist trying to figure out how to survive, an artist trying to figure out how to fit in a society, and this is teaching. So I believe that that delay is called academy. That delay is precisely what you mean by a system which reproduces itself constantly, and it exists, and it's called academy, and people discuss for ages the most intricate things in universities right now. And they need a paper to do so, and it's a system designed to replicate itself. And I believe that in some sort, our schools are ways to trying to stand in a very thin line between an academy and the market, but they have to use them both without falling completely into each.
Any other comments on this?
Well, I think education is about making people, more human. And I think we forget about that a lot in this kind of more institutionalized, not corporative kind of situations that our art schools have become, you know. And I think it is, you know, I remember we talk about a lot in Cátedra, Arte, Conducta, and it was called behavior art. So there you go. It was there. So it was about how to be a better person as well. It's not just how to do better work. So I think that's education, no?
Maybe it's a good moment to open it up to all of you. If there are questions for our speakers, we can take them now. Any urgent questions?
$1 for the first question. That guy got the dollar. I don't have it cash, I'll sign a check.
Hi. Oh, that's loud. I was just interested in, a couple of you have kind of mentioned this, I was interested in what sense of responsibility you kind of felt. Obviously, Bruce High Quality, that seems to be something that's more run by the people and the responsibility is on them. A couple of the other groups up there, it seems to be more of an institution, but I just wonder whether it was, what sense that responsibility was. Was it a pressure, and or does it not matter?
Well, because the Bruce High Quality Foundation makes art, and in a way its first role has always been as an artist, I mean, that's really different than the responsibilities that come along with, like, suddenly having a very real sort of institutional problems to deal with. I think art, the only responsibility that people making art have is to make good art. And I think utility falls in a very precarious place in that, if utility is there at all. Maybe it is sometimes, but I'm really skeptical of where utility enters into what the purpose of art is. But as soon as, I mean, whether anyone thinks that they're an institution or not, like, there are institutional problems, of course, that immediately, like, come into being when there's a group of people that are assembled. You immediately have a different set of, you know, more political responsibilities that, in my opinion, don't exist in art making.
I don't know, I consider it a practice, and it's this kind of I find it to be a responsibility where you just have to continue this conversation or dialogue with the research you're making, because it kind of informs the viewer, and it's just creating this, like, constant relationship between the people that are going to be seeing your work and the work itself.
I don't know if when you were talking about responsibility, you were talking about this, or you were talking about responsibility. I always thought responsibility in the moment you have to build a curriculum, you know, like not the European curriculum, like resume, like a school. You know, when people, they say, oh, you teach, and the first thing we always thought, we will never teach, you can't teach at your own school, not because it's part of your responsibility. So I think the responsibility, it's the moment you build a curriculum for the school. So you take a responsibility in the moment you try to give the best speakers for them, trying to not to fuck up, you know. So, and that's the difference between running a project. You know, you said that they are more who goes, pick what they want to do and everything, but they said we make art. No, it's different. Me, I'm a secretary, so I can't give my personal opinion, so I have to make sure that the people I invite, they are completely above parts. You know, there is no any personal opinion in inviting a certain kind of people, you know. And if we take the risk of inviting somebody that we consider it like an opinion, we will make sure that we will balance it back. You know, it's like I was very obsessed about this science class, about some particular form of energy, and I really felt the responsibility then to invite Sylvie Fleury to do a class. She's very much into this new age energy crystal, so was a very nice match. So we would have no opinion. No, that's maybe the best way to go around the responsibility. No.
In my case, there were several aspects of responsibility. It was, first of all, the fact that when I invited people from abroad, they were going to work and work hard. They were working every day for 6-7 hours. So that was my responsibility, inviting people, international, highly important international artists who were working their ass off for the Cubans who were in the project. That was my first responsibility. The second responsibility, they drink and have fun too, huh? But that was later after things were. The second responsibility is that I stopped doing artwork in Cuba during the time of the project, because my work is very critical, and I understood that if I did something wrong or something that was sensitive to the government or something, it will be influencing the way in which the people in the projects will be perceived. So I decided to stop. And actually the first time I showed after 7 years was in 2009 at the Biennial. It was the moment I closed the project. So, and the other thing was, for example, now that I have here Els van der Plas, was, for example, that we received 2 times fundings, one from the European Community and one for the Prince Claus for the project, and they were at that moment not well seen by the government. So it was my responsibility to put their name everywhere we were doing the project. So.
Great, so I think we're running out of time. We can take one last question, yeah.
I think that here we are talking about integrity and honesty, which is a very strange place here in Basel. I have a question for you. How you reinvent a new fair?
One little question. Basel, they are honest. They don't have an art magazine also. They don't have also an art magazine over the fair. So they are honest people.
Do you want to answer?
Yeah.
Well,
my honesty, I don't need an art fair. So.
Well, if I had to reinvent an art fair, I would basically make clear that an art fair is not a place to go and look at art. And I think one of the big problems with art fairs is that for some reason there is this big misunderstanding with the public in general that an art fair is a place where you go and look at art. And I mean, I think art fairs are very important and they serve very important functions, but they are not the place to go and look at art. That's why museums exist or galleries, etc. So that's my comment.
Any other answers?
I think she's Italian, and I think we have the same English. So I think I got the question that got a little bit lost in translation. And no, I think it's very important that we are speaking in a fair, no? Because you know, it's like when you run a school or you run an institution, or you know, she said it's my own project, but she's been letting her life go to run it. So we all are stupid, and we have this idea of the mission, no? So I think the art fair are the first place. I think we should talk everywhere and make sure that, you know, everywhere, you are a school, so you go everywhere you have a public, no? And nobody of us, I don't know, we don't pay nobody, and I don't know how much they can pay people who come to teach and everything. So I think we should all thank all the artists who come fucking to teach for free and waste their time after all this institution or not institution that we are or we are not. No? So maybe we should close on thanking all the people who help us with no reason.
Unless anybody on the panel has another urgent thing to conclude. If you said something else urgent, we can still say. We've got 1 more minute.
I think the sushi could be a lot better in the collector's lounge. You could work on that.
Thank you very much. Many, many thanks to Eduardo, to Joshua, to the Bruce High Quality Foundation, to Tania, to Domingo, to Piero, to all of you. And a very special thank and applause also for Silvia Shivaratondo and Claudio Vogt for the wonderful organization. Thank you.